is wonderful. Counting is marvelous. Counting's terrific. And how?
Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan. Welcome back to Counting Kryptofreaks. It is the 14th episode of Season 3 Smallville. We're going to watch and discuss Obsession this time, a fan favorite episode for a lot of people, and an episode that I've honestly never really cared for. I think this one is really predictable and kind of by the numbers, paint by numbers, Kryptofreak fare. It really goes back to the first season. We're not doing enough, I think, to turn that formula on its head anymore. We're really back to just the typical beat for beat episode outline with this, and I get that people enjoy the chemistry between Clark and Sarah Carter this episode, our guest star, and the creators of this show liked that so much that they brought her back for a season 4 episode. I can't remember if that was a two-parter or not. I think it was, and I never saw it. I didn't think that we had the writing and the story here to back it up. I think that she's a really one-dimensional kind of character, and I don't get it, but we're going to talk about it, and I'm going to tell you the things I do like about this episode. The production values are great, and some really good directing here. Just like last episode, I say most of the production values are there. Of course, we do have some silly bullet time, and we'll get to that. But it's a really well directed episode. It's a finely made show, just like last time. And I do think that it's a better episode than our episode from last time. The Pete Ross becomes basically a Kryptofreak himself. But anyway, Obsession, not to be confused with the Star Trek The Original Series episode where Kirk is trying to kill a giant cloud creature. This one is about a girl who is obsessed with our protagonist and has a sexual fixation and wants to control his life. So we'll get into all of that and more if you want to watch it with me, and I encourage that you do that. Make sure to get out your DVD or Blu-ray if the Blu-ray set is out by the time you get around to this. Your Hulu, which is the way I'm watching it, any way you want to watch it, get it past any menus to timestamp 0. Once again, make sure that you're watching Season 3, Episode 14. It's been a couple of days since I watched this in preparation for this show. I wasn't able to get to it right away, so hopefully everything comes back to me as we go along here. There might be a little bit more dead air than usual as I'm getting my thoughts together, but let's go ahead and get right into it. Once again, really encourage that you watch it with me, and let's get right into it. Everybody, please press play right now. So we've got that Luthor Corp shot up the side of the building that we use, or the front of the building, I guess, that we use 6 billion times in this show. Lionel here gives us a kind of disturbing bookend where at the beginning of the show, we've got him pretending like he really cares about these children and their future, and he is laying on his false altruism really super thick. And then at the end, we're going to see the kind of mad scientist playing God larger plot at work that he's got going on when we find out what he's been doing to Adam and how he's the one who's been using Clark's blood or used Clark's blood to bring him back to life in testing just what Kryptonian blood can do. Don't get too excited. That's going to be a totally dropped plot thread. And by the time we get to Season 4, Lionel is suddenly going to have forgotten a lot of things that you have to assume that he knew with all of this. One thing I really dislike about this episode is it opens with something that seems far more interesting than where we go. When we're first introduced to Clark's flame for this episode, he's going to have yet another love triangle with somebody else, and Lana. Alicia seems really interested in business, and she seems really naive and buying into Lionel's lines and his philosophy, and I would have liked to have seen that explored and contrast Clark and Alicia's ideology or their belief system as far as like business and hard work and what all of that means. See how they were raised, and it would have been really interesting if instead of her just being a typical homicidal Kryptofreak, if she was raised to be kind of, more cutthroat and ruthless, but, didn't think there was anything wrong with it, kind of like Lex was, and she and Clark, really get together, and he sees maybe all of the things in her that he finds interesting about Lex. Like, what if she was like a, female Lex Luthor that he falls in love with? That would have been really interesting. There are a few things like that are, I think, missed opportunities for this episode. This is an extremely easy situation that they would just get in a faulty elevator in Luthor Corp, of all places. A man Lionel Luthor, who has seemingly unlimited resources, can't keep his elevators up, apparently. How insanely contrived is this? As much as we have things like convenient unconsciousness, we also have stuff like this, the inverse of that, where we have to constantly conveniently make it so that main characters don't find out about Clark's secret. We also have to contrive ways for other people to find out immediately. The only reason that something like this has never happened with Lana is because we have a series Bible thing where she's not allowed to find out the secret until we finally let that happen seasons and seasons later, when we've spun our wheels so much that we finally resort to doing the thing we should have done after the first season. And it's just absolutely insufferable. The initial situation here is fine. That Clark would, besides how contrived it is, like I said, the idea that Clark finds someone that he thinks he can share his secrets and his life with, as opposed to Lana, who he's been worried about putting her in harm's way because of what he can do, and his parents don't want her to find out for obvious reasons. When somebody who finds out of their own accord and also has abilities like you do finds out, and you're attracted to them, and you're enamored with them, it seems at first like that's a relationship that should work out. And I have always said that a lot of relationships in comics with superheroes are kind of more interesting with somebody that they can share that side of their life with. The Spider-Man and Black Cat, or the Daredevil and Elektra. Sometimes I think it's hard to make relationships work, not impossible, and a lot of the best ones are this way, work with, for lack of a better way of putting it, regular people, non-powered, non-vigilante individuals. Because, and this is where some good and also terrible drama comes from, they're not going to understand always why you have to put your life on the line, why you don't have enough time for them, etc., etc. We very often will make love interests really unreasonable just to do that kind of drama. But sometimes it's warranted. Sometimes a love interest that isn't sharing that life simply can't understand what you're going through and why you find it so necessary, why you think you have that responsibility on your shoulders. And somebody that shares that responsibility with you would understand it more. So I'm going to use that to segue into this point. What if she not only had powers and can understand him in that way, but was somebody that, like him, was constantly trying to use them to help people and to save people, instead of being out for herself and turning out to be basically a horror film villain? This episode is potentially interesting for 10 minutes, and then suddenly, once you realize what formula we're in, it completely loses me. She's another Tina Greer. She is that guy that Chloe fell in love with in the worst episode of season 1, the telekinetic kid. She is that Ian kid. Again, she's all of the love interest Kryptofreaks who at first seem like decent matches for our characters until we find out that they're simply psychopaths. It's just not interesting. We don't get into how she gets this way psychologically. The reason that something like Eric Summers in the first season, for instance, is more interesting than this, is we see his transformation. We see him, and I don't mean to say that it's more interesting because that's an origin for, basically, for a character getting powers. But it's, I mean, there's some really nice exchanges and kind of like endearingly awkward moments with these two that I think is a lot of the reason that people were so into this, where their relationship does feel very natural. They act like teenagers, even if they're both in their mid-20s. And I like that about it. She smiles a little too much. There's something creepy about that smile. Maybe that's intentional. I'm not sure. We're getting back to the Adam stuff here. I made a mistake last episode because I'm rusty. It's been a while since I've watched this stuff. Finally coming back to this series after a year and a half. But Adam was not brought to life through kryptonite. I think I made the mistake of saying that just because I had forgotten that it was the Clark's blood thing. And I said that I have no interest in this plot, and I stand by that because just this guy is a love interest I didn't care about because I remember where all of this was going. But it's also not interesting because once we introduce or reveal the Lionel Luthor of it all, again, eventually we're going to just drop that whole plot, and it's not actually going to really go anywhere. And so this all ultimately, if memory serves, is going to kind of be a waste of time. This guy has suddenly had this turn. It really feels like early on in the season, the writers aren't totally sure who he is and where they're going with this. Retroactively, I'm not sure I buy what we're told about it, that Lionel basically brought him back to life. It's pretty convoluted to, in this experiment, and then wants him to use Lana to find out more about Clark. The way they initially get together, it's almost this reverse psychology thing of he calls her out on all of her crap and is like, you've got to quit playing the victim all the time and, stand up for yourself and be your own person and all of that. Not a great way to get dates, usually. It ended up working out, but that's not the most direct and safe way to do that. So if his job from Lionel was get close to her, that's not how I would have done it. And so I'm not buying that. That feels like a choice made very retroactively. But yeah, initially, we don't know, of course, that when we get to her house finally, it's going to turn out that she's got her parents over a barrel, and they're constantly looking over their shoulder, and she has complete control over them. And once we get to that place, I'm like, oh, okay, so you're just a one-dimensional Kryptofreak. The point I was trying to make earlier about Eric Summers is he has this transformation where he gets to that place with his parents. His father is abusive, and he's been kind of pushed and bullied his whole life, and finally the shoe was on the other foot. So the idea is that kid was raised wrong, and you have this direct contrast between his upbringing and Clark's upbringing, and so it's an interesting mirror for Clark, especially because that kid gets Clark's exact powers, of course. With this girl, with Alicia, it just seems like a scary horror movie scenario, and the relationship itself isn't interesting because she's basically just a plot device to have a bad guy in an episode. It's also redundant because we already did this earlier. I'm pretty sure it was this season, right? Earlier in the season with Kyla, and this episode never brings her up, which is kind of weird. She should be talked about here, because it's the same thing where he thinks that he's found somebody he can share his life with. She also has powers. It's a little bit different in that she knows things about his Kryptonian background through the Kawachis. This whole thing about Clark having an interest in astronomy, That's a Power Rangers villain. In astronomy is totally bogus to me. I don't buy that he actually knows that much about the stars. I really think that that telescope is just there as an excuse to be a peeping Tom Welling. And I think there are some other episodes earlier where he actually is looking at the stars. But wouldn't it be nice if he had interests that he actually talked about in a coherent and articulate way? That'd be great, because he's still kind of this generic character that doesn't seem to. And I understand when you're a teenager, you may not know exactly what you want or what you want to do with yourself, but what are his concrete interests and hobbies? Most people have some of those, and that kind of thing seems really superficial. Oh, he likes astronomy. How about he talks about it a little bit? How about at some point he takes a girl up to his loft and he goes, this one is Ursa Major, and this is this other constellation. I do not recall that ever happening. He's apparently a science fiction fan. At one point he says something about Close Encounters. Can't even say the entire name of the thing. It never says anything else about sci-fi movies, anything specific about that particular movie. He apparently likes Radiohead. Never talks specifically about bands and things. Go back to Buffy. Go back to Xander. He'll quote like specific like comic numbers and things. We know what the guy's interests are. And I think it's hilarious that in this same episode, a little bit later, she's going to have a speech about how Lana doesn't have anything that she doesn't have, and will ask the question, hey Clark, what do you see in her? Why are you so in love with her over anybody else? And that's not a question I can answer. I never liked this song. This was on the radio real hard when this came out. It's earwormy. It would get stuck in my head, and I just don't like it. I don't care for this guy's voice. I don't know. So I guess this might sort of be the same thing with Eric Summers to a degree, where and more like his name's escaping me, Byron, the kid whose parents lock him in a cellar, where she gets to this extreme place and is trying to control everybody because she gets locked up and her parents are too overprotective, like she just said. So maybe I was being a little bit unfair about it a second ago, because I kind of forgot about that point, but I still don't think we go far enough with it. It's kind of just, okay, her parents were scared, didn't know what to do, didn't let her explore her ability, let it be a part of herself, tried to change her. I do like that we get that contrast in this conversation, don't get me wrong, that Clark says, my parents are great. I mean, sometimes we don't agree on, what I should do with my powers, and they can be, a little bit difficult and stuff, but they let me be myself. They know that my powers are a part of me. They take the risk and allow me to do something with them. That's good. But the contrast we get is just a contrast we've had before with other Kryptofreaks. There's nothing new here, except that she's a hot girl that he's into. That's it. I think we're laying things on a little bit too thick with the near kiss here. They get that close and then end up not kissing. Everything else about that scene, and even, that they would almost kiss and not, but just, I don't know, that they're like a centimeter away from their lips. It just seems, I don't know. This might just be me. That just seems a little too far. But everything else about that, I think, is really indicative of what first dates are like a lot when you're a teenager. And before we find out that she's just a horror movie villain again, I said 10 minutes. We're like 15 minutes in, I think. But until we get to that point, I related to some of this. There are things about this relationship that remind me of first dates and early relationships that I've had. And so I'll certainly give it that. And then I like the male fantasy of it all. okay. I mean, you could say that scenes like this are kind of exploitative and that kind of thing, but just speaking as a guy who was once a teenage heterosexual male, this as a fantasy is a thing that a lot of us can certainly relate to. Wouldn't it be cool if this girl that you were really into just suddenly showed up in your bedroom and or not even just would it be cool, but like what would you do? It would be difficult to push away the temptation to break the rules of your father's house, of your parents' house, and go ahead and go through with it when she's right there and you're both ready and willing and really into each other. I'm not sure I buy that in a scene like that, so close to heat from last season, that he's not accidentally using his heat vision. So this is a really awkward scene. I guess the big disappointment for me with this episode is I feel like it's kind of cheating, because it makes her like me along with Clark for too long of the episode. I mean, I said earlier, like 10 minutes in and already, nah, it's longer than that, and maybe that's actually more of the problem. And then at the moment that she shows that she is kind of a crazy stalker girlfriend, Clark is pretty much done with her. And I like that he is smarter and more reasonable than he's been in some other episodes, and that some of our other characters that have fallen in love with Kryptofreaks like this have been. He's not in denial about it. He doesn't go, no, she can't have done all these horrible things, like both Clark and Lana did with the clone Kryptofreak guy, Ian. So that's good. I appreciate that. But then there's just not enough meat on the bone for the episode. So this is the first, well, I guess the second piece of evidence that she's not all there. Something's going on with her, where she is, maybe and maybe not, like she is teleporting to his bedroom, and then she's, kind of stalking him, watching him from behind a door. You could either read that as, she's a little off, people shouldn't do that kind of thing, or you could read it as, well, she's really excited about this guy that she's starting to date, and maybe she's moving a little bit too fast, but if you had that ability, wouldn't that be a temptation for you as well? And so, I guess I do like the ambiguity there, where we're still led to wonder, at least right now in the moment, if she is gonna turn out to be, an actual Kryptofreak, or if she's just using an ability kind of immaturely right now. I wish it was more of that first thing. I wish this was a character that was more endearing and then ultimately tragic, as opposed to a Tina Greer type who was already out to lunch in the first place. I just wish we saw her kind of graduate to this level. And it might have been smart to make this a two-parter in the first place. To make her a, really likable, sympathetic love interest for him in the first place. And then see her kind of, go down a darker path, kind of like Lex Luthor in Microcosm. I can't help but more and more want to see her as an analog for Lex here. Or where the episode really stays with Clark, and we believe for a lot longer that she's not out to lunch, and then we're just more creative and clever and subtle about how we finally let him know that. So, and this would be difficult to write, but you don't throw him under the bus. What's your secret, Clark? I like those kinds of lines with Lex. sometimes that kind of thing is too cutesy, and I don't know, maybe it's just the way that Rosenbaum sells it, but when he says that there, I really like it, because it's that double entendre of what's your secret with women, but also it's his secret that Lex has been after this whole show. That's the whole reason that he got her in the first place, and that she teleported into his bedroom and all of that. But it would have been, I think it actually could have worked to make her nuts from the beginning, and without throwing Clark under the bus and making him seem like an idiot, like let the audience not know about it for longer than we have here. This just feels like about the point that we usually do this plot point. And it's immediately disturbing right now. Like, as soon as he walks in and we see these parents, I know exactly what's going on, and the rest of the episode writes itself. In fact, I'm going to pull back a little bit on something I said at the beginning, because I made it seem like I'm struggling to find, a lot of positive stuff about this episode all the way through. I think now that I'm looking at it again, the first half of this episode is fine. This is the turn that it makes where I'm like, this could have been a lot more interesting. But, I do have to say, at least Clark isn't made stupid to make this work. And we do that kind of thing a lot. So, the lead paint thing is strange, and I don't even mind it. I just wish retroactively somehow we could have gone back and inserted it more often. The idea that she has because I like that we do some of these parallels with her and Clark and their abilities. I like that she's got a like a kryptonite just like he does, but it's weird that it's also one of his weaknesses. So what is it about the kryptonite and the way she got her powers, which, by the way, really we don't know anything about what it mixed with or anything. I think it was just, I can't remember now talking over it what exactly it was, but I think it's just another something kryptonite she ended up with this ability. What is it about the kryptonite giving you teleportation that gives you that particular weakness when nothing else we've seen that I can recall is stopped by lead except for Clark's X-ray vision? I would have actually liked it if other Kryptofreaks had that weakness, and that was a property that maybe something, kryptonite being from Clark's homeworld, that maybe he and the kryptonite itself share for some reason. There's some kind of lead connection. So that's going to be my question to Astrel when I get to heaven this time. How come lead stops her ability but no others? And what does that have to do with Clark's connection to lead, his relationship with lead? The reason that was used is because originally in the Tina Greer episode, because of course they're thinking about that, because it's basically that again, except this character's fixation is on Clark instead of Lana, and instead of being Lana or being Clark. The lead paint thing was supposed to be how she was beaten in, I think, her first episode. Maybe her second, I'm not sure. No, her second episode. And then that was changed to the ship, making that a major plot point for the season. And so Gotham Miller decided to do it here. I wish we did, and I wouldn't want it to be too cutesy, because we do this with thematic things with powers, but I wish we did something more thematic with the teleportation. Not that every scene I need somebody saying something about moving somewhere or disappearing or something. I don't mean that, but there's just not a whole lot really done with it. It feels like sort of an arbitrary power she's given. So all of this, of course, is just messed up. This is the show still having this identity crisis of, is it a family drama or is it a horror show? It constantly feels like these people would rather be making a different show. And that's why stuff like this really doesn't work for me. I think the occasional small-town weird horror episode is just fine with this material. I think it is shoehorned in way too often into stories that it really shouldn't be, or we start with that premise, we start with that attitude with a premise that I think would have been better served for something else. But I also think the horror thing could have been done better too, if it had to be that. I like that he doesn't flat out accuse her right away. He just says, did you have anything to do with this? He's still trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, even though she's been acting really weird, and she's shown some serial killer type behavior, particularly marking out Lana Lang's picture in the yearbook. That's raising some red flags. That's one of those shots that's a little bit clunky, where sometimes, I don't know what it is, just this almost uncanny valley thing where in this show and other stuff too, I feel like I can see a special effect coming on, like it's about to happen. The way he stops there and is about to grab at her, it's like you can tell there's a special effect that's about to happen. Something about the timing of it is off, I think. Her ability is not too far off from a thing that Clark can do, and I think it's interesting that she doesn't know he has super speed through a lot of this. Now, that's not to say that just because he can move as fast as he can, that her ability doesn't supersede his in some ways, because he's not going to be able to suddenly appear in a room. If there's a locked door, he's going to have to break it down. Everybody is so surprisingly reasonable this episode. Chloe's not, and it makes episodes where they're not worse, right? Where she is like, no, I understand why you kept that secret. I'm not being jealous. I'm not blaming you for not telling me everything right away. Everybody's really reasonable except for Lana, who gets insanely passive-aggressive at the end of this episode. And I don't like her. I think this ploy is smart, though. I like this okay, where they come up with this ruse so that she'll go and try to figure out how to help Clark, because they're pretending like the sheriff suspects Clark for hurting her father, so that they can kind of get her out in the open. That's smart. And also, it sounds like a totally plausible thing to happen given her recent relationship with Clark. I mean, the sheriff. She doesn't have a full-on confrontation with him like she did last episode, but every time they're in a scene together, she's got this look on her face like, why are you always at crime scenes? Leave me alone. You're not a cop. What is going on? I've said this before, but I like that actress a lot, and I wish she had gotten a little bit more to do in the show. She was a really great replacement for Sheriff Ethan, and I'll double down on what I said last episode. How cool would it have been if she had become his Commissioner Gordon and learned his secret, or at least knew just enough that she would start actually working with him and calling him up for things. If it became a problem with, you know, her knowing his secret past the point that he's Superman, I guess we could have killed her off, but the show wasn't worried about that with Pete Ross. So I don't know that it would have been bad for her to know that. So now she's talking about running away together, and Clark is pretending like he is okay with doing that. It's weird, because, well, I was going to say, that's a little bit like the Goofy Snow Globe episode with the guy who kind of brainwashes Lana to want to run off with him. And, of course, in this situation, he's just pretending. We have these beats that we've seen before in episodes, and again, I think that it's pretty by the numbers, but in getting there, at least everybody's a little bit smarter about it. It's weird, I think I'm enjoying this more talking over it. And I still don't want to give it too many passes, because I don't get people's fixation with this girl that had this fixation with Clark. I'm also not 100% sure that obsession is the right title, by the way. When I described it earlier, I meant what the episode thinks it's about, but she's not obsessed so much as she's controlling, right? I do think that she likes him, and that all of what they felt at the beginning was real. But I don't know that it's an obsession in the more we're looking at it, in the same way that Tina Greer was. But maybe so. It just seems like it's more about his conveniently having everything she wants right now than it is her, like, actually truly thinking they're soulmates. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's how it always watched to me. Whereas, like, she's trying to force puzzle pieces together. She's decided they're soulmates. She doesn't actually believe that. But, I mean, maybe it still is an obsession, just not so much with Clark himself as it is with bending the world to her knees. That is the most obvious prop knife I've ever seen. That does not look like a metal blade at all. That looks like a piece of cardboard or plastic. No, go ahead, stab Lana, because it's just going to crush itself. Or probably bend in half is more likely what it would do. Ooh, everybody's asking what everybody's secrets are. Lex asked Clark that question earlier. The difference is Clark has a secret, and we know why she was, at least Alicia was into him. And we know that that's the reason, a lot of the reason that Lana's into him. She doesn't know exactly what he can do, but he's constantly saving her and other people, and she's attracted to that. And that's understandable to some degree. It's maybe not something to build a relationship on. The part where he keeps saving you, that kind of, I forget what that syndrome is called, but that, like, doctor-patient thing where you fall in love with the guy that saved you. The part where he's constantly helping other people, that tells you about his character. That's something to build at least some part of your relationship on. But man, I laughed out loud this last time I watched this, because I'd forgotten about that, when she says, "What's your secret?" Yeah, what is her secret? What do you like about her, Clark, besides the fact that she's hot? Even Alicia, there's more to it than the fact that she's attractive. It's still pretty superficial. There's a little more to it. The lead paint thing needs a little bit of explanation, I think, because like Goffer Miller or somebody in the companion mentioned in the entry on this episode, lead paint's not a thing that's made here anymore, and so they said that paint can would have to be pretty old. And I don't know, I guess this is a really old building. Maybe it doesn't need explanation. I just wouldn't think that you would still have a lot of stuff from back when it was a movie theater still laying around. But maybe so. Maybe that's a silly nitpick the more I'm thinking about it. But I was just surprised, oh, lead paint. Nobody mentions, like, it's kind of unusual to have lead paint laying around. Speaking of lead paint, that's the bullet time moment, and it looks terrible when the paint comes up. That is gross and would probably really sting your eyes and be terrible. And she's got lead paint all over her, so she could have cancer now. We got some convenient unconsciousness there. Clark has saved Lana now for the 6 billionth time. That's probably a thing that we should have been counting. Lana saves. Okay, can I come in so that I can guilt trip you under the pretense of thanking you? I hate this scene. It's horribly written. Alicia is right when she says, "What do you see in Lana?" And I mean seconds after I came to thank you. And like the way her facial expression changes. Yeah, thanks so much once again for saving my life, Clark, from a demented psychopathic Kryptofreak. Oh, by the way, she said that she knows your secret and that you're still in love with me. That's crazy too, isn't it? Why am I supposed to care about any of this anymore? Stop it. I hate that stuff. You remember that part in season 2 in the caves? Was it 2 or was it here this season? It's been a while. When she's crying and she's afraid that he's going to leave. No, it must have been 2 when she finds out that Whitney's died. Isn't that what it is? And she's like, I don't care if you have secrets, Clark. Yeah, that didn't last very long. No, it did not. Someday you'll find the person who's right for you. So they need to have a real heart-to-heart talk, though, about what that means exactly. Because the reason that they're not, they as a family have elected to not tell Lana Clark's secret is because she might get in harm's way if she knows. Somebody tries to murder her on a weekly basis, so I don't understand why we're that worried about that. It would be better if she knew, because he's got super hearing, and she could just go, hey, Clark, once again, I'm about to get murdered by a stalker. Come help me. She actually should know his secret, now that I'm thinking about it, because of that. But it's like she's a normal person without powers who can't handle that information because it could put her in danger. That's it. That's the reason, right? It's not because they don't trust her. I don't know why they would trust her any less than Pete. And I said, well, actually, me personally, I'm not sure they should. She seems like she would hold a grudge. If she ever, if Clark ever did anything that made her want to get revenge again, I could see her going and telling somebody a secret. But the show doesn't think that she's that kind of character, so, and neither do the kids. So my point stands, I suppose. So the conversation they should have is, what kind of person could he ever tell his secret to? And eventually that's obviously going to be Lois Lane, just because she is destined to be Clark's wife and soulmate. Why is she able to handle it? I guess just because she's going to be an investigative reporter and put herself in, harm's way anyway. But again, Lana is constantly randomly, for no good reason, winding up in these kinds of situations, as it is. So yeah, this is really screwed up. I don't think I called this first time out. I had forgotten about it last episode, to be brutally honest with you. And this could have led to something a lot more interesting. This is all really messed up and scary. Not just that Lionel is willing to do this to this person, because it's horrific, and he's young, and he's probably younger than Lex even, but more than that is the fact that he is so on the verge of not only figuring out Clark's secret, but also being able to use his physiology to his own ends. But they haven't made me, they made me dislike this character intentionally, where he's been kind of a villain for a little while now, a couple episodes. I guess they made him sympathetic in the sense that he's desperate and that's why he's doing these things, but I don't think I'm supposed to really care what happens to him on the level of, he is a supporting cast member now, or something like that. Like it's obvious that he's gonna get written out soon, even a couple of episodes before this, and so once we get to what I'm saying is he's supposed to be this really sad, tragic character who's ultimately disposable and going to be written out of the show, and there's something kind of routine about that as well. Like, by the time we get to this place, I guess it's better than I guess it's better knowing what was done to him and that he really is a victim in this situation than it was just having him threatening Lana. Like, I guess I care a little bit more now because of that. But in that scene, I have a hard time feeling anything for him. Like, it's disturbing on the principle of it, but I wish that was a character that they had earlier on more made me really care for. And I think they tried. I mean, I think they maybe more or less did their best with it, but there's just something off about it where maybe it's just because I never bought him and Lana as a couple and like as a couple that could last, and I didn't really see a whole lot of great chemistry there. Their first meeting is pretty good, but after that, I don't know, it never really clicked to me, and that's the level that I'm supposed to be caring about it on, I think. And so through that lens, because that's not gelling enough, once we get to this place, I don't really care if I see this guy again. And we're going to, in a couple of episodes, he's going to come back and wreak havoc and just become the standard villain for an episode. And I don't know, it's just once we get to that, it again, watch is real typical. I guess that's the word of the day. I enjoyed that more than I did even on the watch that I did in preparation for this. So that's good, at least. I talked myself out of a couple of arguments. That's always fun. Let's go ahead and go to the count now. We've got one Kryptofreak, of course, in Alicia. She will eventually be a recurring Kryptofreak. We're going to get her back again, and I'm curious to see if, after the kind of odd experience I just had with this, I might end up liking that episode better when we get to 4. I guess we'll find out. We've got a Lana stalker this time, who is Adam, and probably the first time we've had a recurring character around this long before he becomes an official Lana stalker. We've got a love triangle with Clark, Alicia, and Lana. Didn't point out love triangle face, but there certainly is some of that when, actually quite a bit of that, when Lana finds out that the reason that Clark is happy and smiling is because there's a new girl in his life. Ooh. We've got not a walking, well, we actually have one instance of walking away angry. That's toward the end with Lana after she's being all passive-aggressive, like I said about Clark telling Alicia his secret. But we have a teleporting away angry with Alicia in the hospital, which also doubles as a rude, not super speed, but rude teleporting exit. So not things that we count, but really close to those, so I thought I would mention them. We have one instance, of course, of Clark on green kryptonite, because we have all of the staples of a standard Kryptofreak episode. That's the main thing that I don't like about this episode. I wish that it had somehow gone against that formula a little bit. We have convenient unconsciousness with Lana when Clark hits Alicia with a paint bucket in slow motion. We can't have her seeing that. And finally, we don't have parents that are murdered by a Kryptofreak, but we do have parents attacked by one. So I went ahead and tacked that on because I wonder if that should be the same category. But Alicia's father tries to warn Clark about her, and then he gets put in the hospital. Again, that is pretty messed up stuff. The horror stuff in this episode is effective in a vacuum, I think, but overall, just not as the episode's not compelling on the level I don't think that the creators talk about it. In the companion, they don't talk about it like a horror episode. What's supposed to be interesting and fun about this is all that stuff in the first half, and they kind of conveniently ignore talking about the Tina Greer of it all, which is unfortunate to me. I was somewhere between a 2 and a 2.5 place on this. I enjoyed it enough in the grand scheme of Smallville to almost bump it to a 3 right now, but I really don't think I can bring myself to do that. I think it's still going to be a 2.5, so that is my verdict. Feeling a little bit conflicted about this one as I'm looking at it again, mostly just because I found Clark this time around especially to be pretty reasonable and likable, and I found myself really appreciating his plight to some degree, even if we're kind of been there, done that. I mean, if it is too much of a retread of the like psychopathic, homicidal, Kryptofreak love interest episodes, at least it's an improvement on some of those, so I'll certainly give it that. Next time, the episode in question is gonna be Resurrection, I think, and I don't remember really anything about that episode, so I won't comment on it now. We'll just do it next time. And hope you enjoyed this. Leave your comments, let me know what you thought of this one and what camp you're in with the Alicia thing, and in the meantime, thanks a lot for watching. I was Captain Logan, and I'll see you again next time.